Welcome back to the channel, folks. Today's destination is Britt David Park in Columbus, Georgia. This park features lots of recreation and a walking loop. This is where the Little League teams practice and play. Today is the subjects of market news, Walgreens, and also retirement for Gen X age 50 and 55. For the market news, the news for this week is that Walgreens, among other retail stores, is closing stores across the country. In their words, their current business model isn't sustainable, with lower than expected earnings blamed on weak consumer spending. According to the article, 75% of its stores pull all the weight in performing well. The remaining stores will face changes, including many being closed in the next 3 years. Operating income for Walgreens was just $501 million in the quarter, down from $962 million a year ago, even though sales for the segment rose. So apparently, even though they had more sales, they made less money. For the year, Walgreens plans to align its segments and operations and save $1 billion through store updates and layoffs. There you go, more layoffs. I don't know about you all, but I was guessing the pharmacies and small retail stores weren't doing well. Personally, I rarely buy anything at CVS or Walgreens because it's too expensive. I don't shop at traditional gas stations or convenience stores for the same reason. The price is marked up, everything is more expensive. I buy big grocery hauls and everything to avoid those small purchases at convenience stores since everything is overpriced because it's supposedly convenient. I mean, it's kind of convenient, but if you know where you're going, what you're going to be doing for the day, you have to stop somewhere unless it's like, oh, I forgot to get a bottle of water or something. I'm very thirsty. I'm never out of the house for a long period of time unless I'm at work, which I work remotely now, or unless I'm somewhere like a doctor's office for a long period of time, and usually they have water there. It, it's a it's the idea of, can you control your desires and can you wait to do something? I mean, you can go buy yourself a Coca-Cola there, but it's usually like $3 now. And you also might have to pay a service charge fee because now businesses are trying to charge you for making a transaction instead of eating the cost themselves or marking it up. There are all sorts of things you can do. You can bring a Coke with you. You can have all sorts of things. You can do all sorts of ideas that will put you ahead financially instead of giving all your money away to people who honestly aren't really doing anything for you. So that's my personal opinion. That's why I don't shop at places like Walgreens. It's just not convenient for my budget. So the main topic for this video is Generation X and retirement. I'm a millennial, but I did grow up around a good amount of diverse Gen X folks. Right after the baby boomers, Gen X were the first to encounter American outsourcing of labor. You think of the call centers and concepts where you have phone lines, where you have anything where you use the new fiber optic cables, all of that. Before fiber optic cables were laid down in places like India, there were call centers that were put over there instead of done in the United States of America. So a lot of the Gen X had some of their basic jobs taken away from them and put overseas. And that was kind of the first idea of globalism. And that's what we were taught in the 90s in school when I was a kid. I actually went to college in early 2000, but in early 2000s, but in the 90s in high school and in middle school, they taught about globalism and the power of working together across the globe internationally. It was just a scam. It was basically just to get people into the idea of understanding that your job will be outsourced eventually, because driving down the price of labor was what was most important. That's also where you understand that China got its grasp in its economy and got a boom in its economy because they had a lot of outsourcing, and they had a lot of outsourcing of manufacturing and all those types of jobs. So it's really interesting to study that period of history, because then you find out where this kind of mentality of let's just outsource everything and let's just drive down all the labor costs and let's get rid of all the manufacturing in the USA. Understand how that got to be. Anyway, according to Yahoo Finance, Gen X is least prepared for retirement and oldest that have limited time left to save money. It's incredibly important to understand that the economy and how businesses and employers operate within it has changed since the prime working days of the baby boomer generation, which were the 90s and 2000s, coincidentally, along with the time I was just mentioning that the globalism took off. Jacob Lundfisker, a popular FIRE, which means financial independence, retire early, movement blogger once said, if you can, work fast enough with the highest amount of your earnings completed in your time in the job market with the baby boomers. So make all your money as much as possible when they are making their money. So before they die, get all your money as much as possible while they're working. And this is important because that means what is happening in the economy and why. Well, how capitalism advances, the more tactics discovered to increase value for shareholders, the better capitalism works. Since in the USA, corporations are legally bound to improve conditions for shareholders, their legal goal is to always increase profits. Employees, labor conditions, finite resources, the fact that there is only one Earth doesn't particularly matter. Businesses are supposed to always have profits go up, and particularly they would prefer it to be like an exponential curve. This sort of economic scheme is not based on human well-being, the planet's well-being, or on the actual state of our conditions. Given that there is a joke that economics is not science and just made up fairy tale among all the hard subjects like math, chemistry, physics, and even the arts. They kind of say, who is the black sheep? Well, it was economics. I was a math major, so I'm inclined to agree with the lack of vigor in economics and actual world events and behavior. For example, instead of saying economics models human behavior, and we have changed as a civilization in the West and other parts of the world to oblige capitalism, we've changed as human beings, we've changed our behavior. For example, mass consumption and shopping is not natural human behavior. The consumer mentality and the idea of a consumer in the market is an operating product of the 20th century and is a post-World War II social construct in the new global markets that were created. In other words, they just made it up after World War II. For more information on that, you can read about the Bretton Woods Project in the USA and how the USA became the economic engine of the West and was done as such because they were holding gold reserves for France and England. So we held all their gold. The funny part is about 20 to 30 years later in the 60s and 70s, the United States of America kind of did something shady and devalued all their gold. It's really cool. You need to look it up. Most of the economic systems in the West are based on chattel slavery, which is free labor, and Adam Smith concepts in A Wealth of Nations, that's his book, and the work of John Maynard Keynes, otherwise known as Keynesian economics. Because free labor is what the USA was founded upon, every advancement under capitalism will do its best to keep the cost of labor as close to zero as possible. Because enslaved people never earned wages, indeed they were considered property. So if you never had to pay for labor, why would you start paying for labor? That's pretty much their mindset. This plays out in our current systems in which workers are not paid their true value for their labor's productivity. So in other words, when you produce something and when you produce a project, when you produce a report, when you make something, you're not paid the true value of all the work you've done. It's not even close. As an engineer, when I was working in corporate as a mid-level engineer, someone accidentally sent out the average raw hourly rate they charged our clients for our work internally via email. And it was at least twice as much as we actually made hourly. So the company charged them like, I don't know, $60, and they'd pay me less than $30 an hour. And that's kind of the concept they had going on. The picture on the screen is just an example, but it varies by contract and also by project. So the hourly rates can be all over the place. Think of like lawyers when they charge different clients different rates depending on what they're doing. Companies making profit is a given since they are supposed to take on all the risk. Indeed, the reason people at the top were supposed to make more profits than a laborer was because they put up the money to make a business and hire people in the first place. The problem arises when there is no risk for employers and companies because of skewed market conditions. In fact, nowadays, the laborers, the people like you and me who work in the workforce, take on all the risk as individual people because we can be fired and laid off willy-nilly since the USA has become more of a right-to-work country across the states. Some states like California are not right-to-work states. But in general, under capitalism, the whole point of it is that the people with all the money would take on all the risk and build these companies and make these products and make all this profit. They would make more profit than the person they hired, but not so much more that it was like it was ridiculously in exploitation. That's kind of odd because you think that's how companies came to be. But when you look at when the companies came about, it was the 1960s, and that's what brought people into the middle class, and that's what kind of established the society we have now today. Before that, you had robber barons like Henry Ford and Rockefeller, and those folks had nothing but mass exploitation. They had children working for them, and I think it was Henry Ford that made the 5-day work week, and he only did that because he found out that his employees were too exhausted, so they didn't work as well, and the productivity was not as high. He did that for his pocket; it wasn't for his employees. So it's very peculiar that we have this concept of capitalism where we reward shareholders, we reward all these people, but the people who do the actual work, don't get rewarded as much. You get bonuses and all that kind of stuff, but on a whole, your wages are very, very low. The baby boomers in Congress and across Congresses and states put these laws in place, pulling the ladder up behind them. Pensions are mostly gone, and the idea of staying at one employer for the duration of your career is actually very rare now. Yet making the bulk of your money during this current era right now is still the best strategy. Generation X are in their 50s, and the next best strategy is to work while Generation X are still in the workforce before they pass away and take advantage of any practices they have in place as far as workplace practices. Why? Well, because the future of work will be less people working. That is the goal of the USA system. While for now they need as many workers as possible in certain sectors, for instance, they keep saying we need to hire truckers. That is only until advancements in technology can replace human workers. That's the whole concept where they tell you to skill up. They say if you've been laid off or if you can't do something, get more skills, get more skills. Well, the rate of technology's advancement, you can't possibly get more skills fast enough in order to maintain proper employment. Artificial intelligence, robots, and autonomous vehicles will replace call centers, low-level professional jobs, and truckers. These are call centers that have not already been outsourced. At first, there'll be less people in their positions while they monitor these systems. For example, for truckers, they say when they get autonomous vehicles, like the Tesla already has, level 4 autonomous vehicle where it can drive itself under most any conditions. They say they'll have trucks that'll do that, semi trucks that'll have that. And what they'll have is the truck drive itself, and there'll be one operator in the cabin, one person in there watching the truck. Well, you're not actually driving the truck, so what's going to happen? Your wages are going to go down. So truckers' wages have already gone down. I'll probably do a video on that. It's actually very incredible. Their wages have gone down, so their wages would go even further down if all they're doing is watching the truck drive itself. That's an example. The Yahoo Finance article reports that the median retirement savings for 55-year-olds is less than $50,000. The article essentially goes into how people need personal finance education to learn not to spend all their money. But in actuality, folks need higher wages. It's kind of ridiculous because they say you need to not spend money, you need to be financially educated, but they encourage you to jump from job to job and company to company in order to make higher wages. It's not going to work too well for the long term because these companies are starting to somewhat collude and offer the same salary across the board. When you think about it, it makes no sense to pretend folks are supposed to watch their spending and save for the future because that is the antithesis to how our economy works. I remember as a kid when 9/11 happened, George W. Bush went on TV the next day and said, "You can help save America by going out and buying stuff." Spending is the basis of the American economy. They need you to spend all your money. Saving only helps you, not anybody else, especially Wall Street. The article suggests Gen X just grind their money, just grind on their jobs and try to save more, like 25% or more savings and work until they are able to collect Social Security. Well, my suggestion is that folks downsize. If you have reached the age of 50 and do not have a plan for retirement and less than $500,000 in the bank, then just downsize. Get a smaller house, rent a room to family members, rent out your house and live with family yourself. And get rid of all your payments on cars, boats, the latest phones, and throw your money into IRAs, 401ks, and so on. Even high yield savings account. The point is to get rid of all your spending. I hate to use the idea of thinking of your finances as a business, but the less overhead and the less things you have, the better off you are. And that even extends to the concept of go get yourself a plot of land and build yourself a house. I mean, you can build yourself a tiny house and use solar or something else and not have to pay any type of bills whatsoever. It all depends on what kind of life you want to lead. I think that designing your life and figuring out what you want out of life is far more important than these influencer lifestyles that you'll see. Many millennials and Gen X I know say that their goal is to work until they die. I even had an intern who had that exact mentality. His parents had a nice house in Florida, so he'll probably inherit it. So that's not likely true, but he did leave the lower cost of living in Atlanta to move to New York City, so he might actually have to work until he passes away. Well, that's it for this video, folks. There is a lot to learn from different types of concepts of living. So in some of my future videos, I will explore the topics of tiny houses. I'll explore different types of lifestyles, homesteading, suburban homesteading, urban homesteading, all of that into the future. For now, enjoy the rest of the video and make sure you enjoy all the time you have away from work.